Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voice by Matt show. My name is Matt Bertho. I'm your host, and today I have Alan Stein Jr. on the podcast. I got to meet Alan in Nashville in person, and we really hit it off. What a great guy, great father, but genuinely a nice person. Like I can say that about you, Alan. Like there are some people that we meet in this entrepreneur, self-help, high-performance space that sometimes you're like, I don't know about this person. But Alan was not that guy. So welcome to the show, Alan.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. That feeling is very mutual. I think that's probably why you and I hit it off so well right from the beginning. And I actually had that feeling about you before we met in Nashville, because we had some dialogue via email and some kind of pre-event, electronic banter. And I just had a feeling you'd be super easy to work with, so supportive, and obviously very great at your craft. So I'm honored to be here, man. This will be a fun conversation.
Yeah. And, Angela made me listen to my 8th podcast ever. Because she said, you got to listen to like what you did in the beginning. And I was like, all right. So I listened to it. And there was this moment that I heard, oh yeah, you guys should subscribe. You should share with your friends. You should tell people about the podcast. So I'm saying it now so you guys can all go and follow Alan on Instagram. And, he speaks literally all over the country. He's got 2 books. I see him in the back there, Raise Your Game, Sustain Your Game. And can I say that you're working on a 3rd book?
Oh, if you don't, I will. So absolutely.
Okay. Tell them about the 3rd book coming up.
Well, it's kind of in its infancy, and I found tremendous value in the lunch that you, me, and Angela had as you guys tried to help me.
Oh yeah.
Put up some guardrails and put up some ways to kind of get to where I'm trying to go. So, and when I say I'm in the infancy, I'm at a point where I'm ready to take on the endeavor of writing my 3rd book. But I'm just not 100% clear on the exact destination or where I want to go with the book. I have a few different threads that I've been pulling on, and I'm just trying to get some clarity on the direction I want to go. Because as you know, working on your book, it's a massive endeavor. It takes a lot of time and attention and focus. And it's that old adage of, when you're climbing the ladder to success, you want to make sure it's been leaning against the right wall. And it's the same thing with this. If I'm going to put a ton of time and effort and focus and energy into a book, I want to make sure that I'm writing a book, certainly that will be of value to others. I mean, ultimately, that's why we write. But I want to make sure it's going to be something of value to me, and that it's kind of a blueprint for me in this next chapter of my life. Because I've always felt, especially with the first 2 books that I've written, that I try to write the books that I need to read myself. Because that way, when I'm in the writing process and I'm researching, it's both liberating and therapeutic for me to be covering that material, and I'm learning and growing as well. And then I've always been under the assumption that if these are things that I'm trying to do and challenges I'm trying to overcome, there's a good chance there's a few more people on this earth who find the same struggles that I do. So inevitably, I might be writing the book to help myself, but the book will add value to others, assuming I'm not completely in isolation and alone with some of these struggles.
Oh yeah. So Alan, I'm just going to, because I know you and I know you love challenges, and we're just going to hit it. We're going to hit it running right now because you're
Perfect.
A high performance athlete. Alan, how did you find your voice? How did this happen?
Well, it's kind of a culmination of a few things. I do think finding your voice is a constant evolution. I don't know that, and I'll just speak in the first person. I don't know that I'll ever plant my flag and say, hey, everyone, I've 100% found my voice. It's over. I'm going to ride this out. It's going to be a constant tweaking of the dials, constant evolution, becoming more consciously aware. I mean, now I can say with a huge smile and a tremendous amount of pride, I have more of my own voice now than I have at any other previous time in my life. But I also expect that if you have me on your show 2 years from now, that I'll still be able to say the same thing then. Well, that at that point in time, I'll have more of my own authentic voice then than I even do today, because it's a constant journey, a constant work in progress. And it's really come from a few different areas. I mean, the first are kind of the inputs in my life. You know, the mentors that have poured into me, the opportunities I've had, the people that I've followed, the what I read, watch, and listen to. All of that has shaped my worldview and my perspective and my philosophy and ultimately my voice. And then it also comes with some trial and error, because I know for me, when I first entered the performance coaching space, and then when I first entered the corporate speaking space, both times I went through a similar iteration, which was my initial voice was kind of a carbon copy of the people that I wanted to be like. And then slowly over time, I got the confidence and the awareness to drift away from being a copycat to them and being my own original authentic self. And it took me several years as a young coach to not try and be like the coaches that I most wanted to emulate. In the speaking world, the learning curve was shorter. You know, I found myself kind of walking and talking and sounding like other motivational speakers at first, but then within a year and a half, I was able to drift away from that and kind of stand on my own 2 feet.
So give us kind of a fast forward of childhood, mom and dad, high school, college, and then right after college. Because, you know, those years, there's things that happen in those years, like in those giant gaps of the thing, whatever the thing is, right? I call them legs of life.
Yes.
But there's things that happen in those that helped craft and mold you into Alan Stein Jr., right?
Yeah.
So could you take us just briefly through that kind of origin story?
Be happy to, and I'll do my best to highlight the briefly part, because sometimes I can be a little long in the
That's
tooth.
all right.
The most important part is that basketball was my first love. Like, I fell in love with the game of basketball at 5 years old. And I'm so thankful that here I am knocking on the door of 50 years old, and basketball still plays a major role in my life in a variety of capacities. Most specifically now, I'm the father of 3 young kids that all love to play basketball.
Oh,
And many of the stories that I use on stage and many of the stories I write about on page come from my time as a basketball performance coach. So the seed was planted very early, and I'm so thankful that that seed continues to bloom to this day. Another very important inflection point was, I remember when I was in middle school that a mentor of mine gave me what I still consider to this day to be the most valuable advice I've ever received. And he said, the key to everything you're looking for in life, whether it's success and achievement or happiness and fulfillment or freedom, peace, whatever it is, the key is finding what it is you love, finding what it is you're naturally pretty good at, and then finding where those two things intersect. And that point of intersection is called your strength zone. And the more time and effort and focus and energy you can invest in your strength zone, something you love and something you're pretty good at, is a very worthy investment, and it's where you'll feel the most fulfillment. And I've followed that recipe my entire life. I mean, in my younger ages, that point of intersection was as a basketball player. It was something I loved to do and something I was decent at. I mean, not good enough to be world class and play in the NBA, but good enough to at least play through college. But then when I realized that that point of intersection was not going to take me past college, because I didn't have the requisite skill set or athletic ability to play professionally, then that point of intersection moved to being a performance coach. But it still met the 2 criteria of something I loved and something I was fairly decent at. And then I'm now in the 3rd iteration of that strength zone, which is corporate keynote speaking, and it still checks those boxes. So I'm very thankful that I was given, and I heeded that advice very early. And as I just alluded to, I was a fairly decent high school player. Both of my parents were elementary educators, so I grew up in a two-parent household who were very supportive of everything I did. I was able to play basketball in college, and when I was in college, I started to develop an equal love for the performance training side of the game, the strength, conditioning, the fitness, the nutrition, the mindset. So when I graduated college in the late 90s, I thought, what could be better than combining my original love of basketball with this newfound love of strength and conditioning and fitness training. So I became a basketball performance coach. And I did that for just under 20 years before I decided to make the shift to doing corporate keynote speaking and really just take all of those stories and lessons that I had learned from the game firsthand through some elite players and coaches and translate that to teach people how to apply those to life and business. And but I'm still following that advice that I got in middle school. Corporate keynote speaking is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and it's something that I've worked on to be fairly decent at it. So it's fantastic when you can spend your life at that epicenter of your strength zone.
Was there somebody that introduced you to the performance coaching?
Yeah, there absolutely was. There was a gentleman named John Philbin, who at the time was an assistant strength and conditioning coach with the then Washington Redskins here in the DC area.
Sweet.
And he owned a local gym. It was called Philbin's Fitness Center. And I went in there, after school in high school, and he really took a liking to me.
Whoa.
And he was one of the first folks that I had met that was doing actual sports specific performance training. At that time,
Wow.
most people were following a typical bodybuilding
Yeah,
routine,
yeah, yeah.
or just general fitness. You had aerobics and Taekwondo and things like that. But this was the first guy that showed me there's a very specific way to train if you want to run faster, jump higher, be more explosive. And I mean, he had a massive impact on me, and I give him full credit for planting the seed of me wanting to do that. And kind of a crazy full circle moment. About a year ago, I was traveling. I was in Florida. I stopped into a gym to get a workout in. Excuse me. And I bump into him. And I bump
What?
into Coach
In
Philbin.
Florida?
Yeah, I hadn't seen him in probably 20 years. He still looked great for his age. He recognized me immediately. So hopefully that means I look okay for my age.
Yeah.
It was just such a cool moment. And I've told him a couple times before, but I just made sure that I reiterated that I was probably one of 1,000 different high school kids that he had a huge impact on, but he had a massive influence over my life in the direction that I went. And that's another thing that reminds me how important it is to do the work that we do, because you never know who you're having an impact on. You never know the true effect that you're having with the words that you speak or the words that you write. And this was, 30 years ago. This guy planted a seed in me
Wow.
that is still blooming to this day. And he may not have ever even known that. So it was really a random, cool moment to see him again.
So, mom and dad obviously both teachers, and it makes, a lot of sense why you are a professional teacher. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. You're writing books, you're speaking to corporate and teaching them, right? Um, what have been some of your most amazing teaching moments, Alan, that you've had in your life that were like light bulb moments for your student, for your athlete, that just made you go, you know what? I'm so thankful that I took what I'm really passionate about and what I'm good at, and I went for this. What are some of those moments, like some of the players or the students, if you could share with us?
Well, I think what's interesting about the kind of the teaching journey, if you will, most of those moments that occur at that point in time are a little more superficial. It's, I can't believe I'm in this room with these people, or I can't believe I'm traveling to this place, or I'm experiencing this. But the real true fulfillment always comes on the back end. Example, Coach Philbin, having someone that he coached 30 years ago come up to him at a gym in Florida and say, "You had a profound impact on my life,"
That's
had to mean
huge.
the world to him. And I hope that it did. But I'm now getting at an age where that's starting to happen to me.
Mm.
Case in point, and it's just kind of really cool timing of you and I having this conversation. Last week, I bump into, I'll call him a kid. He's no longer a kid anymore because he's in his 30s, but a kid that I trained back at Montrose Christian. He was at the high school where Kevin Durant graduated from.
Okay.
And he comes up to me, and I mean, he's a young man. He's married. He has 2 kids. He is in his 10th year as an NBA referee. I mean, this
Oh,
guy is one of the best in the world at what he does. I mean, I think sometimes we don't give referees their fair shake because everyone's always giving them a hard time. But to
yeah.
put this in perspective, there's 450 NBA players. There's only 75 full-time NBA referees, which on
Wow.
some level means being an NBA referee is even more exclusive than being an NBA player. This guy is in the upper 0.1% of what he does for a living. And he came up to me and we just had an incredible conversation. And it was the same thing. He was thanking me for the things that I put him through and challenged him with when he was in
Mm.
high school, and gave me a little piece of the credit for putting him on the journey that he's on. And it was, I mean, I left that gym, I don't think my feet were touching the floor. I was just floating
Oh
because
man.
it felt so good to know that I had just a little bit of, I was just a little puzzle piece in this young man's journey. Obviously, he's done all the hard work, he's worked on his craft, he's pursued it, he's sacrificed, but it was a really good feeling. So, at the time, when I was training him and Kevin Durant and guys like that, I'm excited for some of the places we went and people I met, but none of that compares to how it feels 20 years later to have someone come up to you and say, "Hey man, you made a difference in my life." And to me, that's the best feeling. And I'm incredibly grateful. I guess it's the age I am now where a lot of those are starting to come out of the woodwork. Whether it's a DM I get on Instagram, "Hey coach, I don't know if you remember me. You trained me 15 years ago," or bumping into a guy at the gym. But to me, that is absolutely the most fulfilling, is when you hear that on the back end, that something you said or something you did actually made a difference in somebody's life.
Hmm. I've heard you do your talks a few times, watching on YouTube, but also in real life. Um, you have a really kind, generous presence about you, Alan. And I'm wondering, where did you learn that? Like, is that just innate, or is it something that you had to work on as a young adolescent male athlete, stud probably in the world? Like, where did this generosity and this humility come from, man?
Well, I've always believed that if you don't have humility, life will give you some. And
that's
I can say, with full
that's so
forgiveness of my
true.
younger self, there's certainly been plenty of times in my life where I've lacked that humility, and especially as an athlete. And I can look back now and say, it was through fear and insecurity, but there was a lot of times in my life where I had kind of the false alpha male bravado, I know everything and nothing can hurt me,
Yep.
when of course the exact opposite was true. And now that I'm just older and I've got kids and I have more life experience, I can fully embrace that. And I'm okay with saying, "Hey, I'm a little nervous about this, or I'm scared about this, or I'm insecure about this," or you ask me a question and I say, "Hey man, I simply don't know." I'm just a little more secure in myself to be at peace with those answers. I would like to believe that I've always had a kind heart.
Hmm.
And I was raised by two really good people, and I'd
Yeah.
like to believe that I'm a good person as well. But I know the generosity is something that is rather newfound. I can look back and in those days of being less humble, and being scared and insecure, I also went through times where I was incredibly selfish.
Yeah.
Every interaction that I would meet someone, I was always thinking, how can this person help me? What
Yeah.
can I get from them? And again, I think at the root of that is still, it's an insecurity. Well, now I'm trying to come out on the other end. And every time I meet someone, yourself very much included, I start thinking of, well, how can I be of service to you? What
Yeah.
can I do to add value to your life? Who can I introduce you to? What can I share with you that might, be beneficial? And I found that it's just a lot more fulfilling when you go through the world, looking through the lens of, "Hey, this isn't about me.
Hmm.
What can I do for you?"
Yeah.
And but it's time will teach, and life experience. So I certainly don't have all of the answers now. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface, but I'm very grateful for the direction at which I'm headed. But most importantly, I've reconciled with my younger self, and I've forgiven my younger self
Hmm.
for many of those missteps, many of those traits that didn't serve me well. I certainly know I have said and done plenty of things that I would never say or do today. but it was all part of the process. And at that time, this is how I give myself forgiveness. At that time, I was doing the best I could to navigate the world with the skills I had. I
Man.
just didn't have very many skills, you know, and if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And that's kind of how I would navigate the world. Well, now at almost 50 years old, thankfully I have higher emotional intelligence. I have more self-awareness. I
Yeah.
have more tools in my toolbox to regulate my emotions and to treat, you know, others and all better. So it's all just a process. And that to me, that's what makes life fun. You know, if I was the same man I was 10, 15, 20 years ago, I probably would have just wasted that time. So I'm grateful for the fact that I'm constantly evolving and hopefully for the better.
Do you think that, like, because I know, like, with my mom and dad, my mom was a certain, almost like a therapist for me. And my dad, he was kind of the hard worker. He was constantly working, busy. Um, what were some of the lessons that you learned from your mom and dad?
I'm a very much a mix of both of my parents, you know, and like every human being walking the earth, my parents have some unbelievably glaring, amazing qualities, and they've got some flaws. And so do I, and so do you, and so does everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we appreciate the totality of that. I mean, I certainly have been able, I guess, to adopt and emulate some of the great traits from both of them, while at the same time, I now have a level of awareness over some of these flaws and shortcomings that I'm simply trying to level up and get better. You know, I mean, one of the main ones, which just purely came from both of my parents being in education, is I have a strong respect and appreciation for education,
Mm.
for teaching, for being a servant leader, for pouring into others. You know, especially with kids. You know, I've always taken a tremendous amount of pride in being a role model and pouring into young people. I mean, I did that vocationally for 20 years. And now I'm trying to do that to the best of my ability with my own three children, is to plant seeds and to invest in the future of our world. So I learned that firsthand from my parents, but I also learned that was something they loved to do. You know, my parents aren't necessarily wealthy from a monetary standpoint, because being elementary educators won't do that for the bank account.
No.
But they're spiritually and emotionally very rich because they spent an entire career doing something that made a difference, that made a contribution, and gave them fulfillment. And while my path to achieving those things is different than my parents, I have no interest in being an elementary school teacher. I still want to be of service, and I still want to have an impact, and still want to live a very fulfilling life. So, that's certainly something that they modeled for me.
Alan, you're very well spoken, and you do have a lot of words that come out of your mouth, which is great. But I want to know, like, where did this come from? Where did you say, you know what? I need to start speaking up. I need to start speaking my truth that's inside of me. It's bubbling because I see it. I feel it. It's just like you're constantly bubbling up with this talk, like this. Your soul comes out and says hello. Your spirit comes out and says hello, which is what I teach my clients how to do. But there's something really special about you that even the last month or two that I've known you, I see it elevating. I see it getting better right now. And I'm curious, like, what is that? There seems to be, from my perspective as a teacher, as a coach, there's an internal fire that's getting kind of turned up in you right now. And I want to know, what is that? Because we all go through seasons of life, and you've mentioned it a couple times, you're going to be 50 soon. And I feel that too. And we know people that when they turn 50, it's like this huge shift happens, right? We know so many people. And I also want to say this, because this was something I was going to ask earlier, I just forgot. A lot of us struggle. You have two questions here. Where's the fire coming from? And number two, because I've been feeling it too. When you do this work on yourself and you elevate and your level of energy grows and it gets higher. It just does. That's I'm gonna say what it is because that's what it freaking is. And your spirit grows and your mental capacity and intelligence grows. You're physically healthier. You're spiritually in a different plane. Emotionally regulated. Emotionally, you start to outgrow your your circle. You start to outgrow your people that might have started with you. So my second question is how do we navigate that, bro? Cuz I'm going through it right now. Like I'm literally growing out of a lot of the things that got me to this point.
Well, I'll answer them in reverse order. I mean, you've got the old analogy of a snake shedding its skin. It's a requirement for growth, and on some level, it takes uh, a confidence and a sense of self to know
Mhm.
that you have to stretch. You have to, I'm very thankful that one of the key tenets in basketball performance training, especially in the weight room or on the court and conditioning, is you have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That if you're doing a set of push-ups, if you're capable of doing 10 push-ups and you only do five, you probably didn't do anything to induce any type of strength adaptation. If you're capable of doing 10 and you do 10 and you try to do number 11 and your arms are shaking and you're sweating like and burning, then you're actually forcing growth. And so I spent most of my life with just an innate understanding that the only way you get to grow and develop and evolve in any area is by intentionally leaving your comfort zone. And now that I'm older, to your point, which was incredibly insightful, I understand that part of that growth is understanding that you're going to change some of the relationships in your life. You're going to make new friends, like you and I is a perfect example.
Yep.
And that means in order to have space for new people in your life, you may have to clear out some of the previous people. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. It
No.
doesn't mean that you don't love them or care about them. It just means you're on a different journey. And, I can say, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well. One of the reasons I would imagine that people get divorced is because they grow in separate directions, or
Yeah.
one person grows at a rate much quicker than the other person.
Yep.
And now there's this gap. And once again, it doesn't mean that they weren't right for each other at the time they got married. It doesn't mean that they're not both really good people. It just means they're either growing in different directions or they're growing at different paces. And friendships and business relationships are no different. I mean, I can tell you without question, my circle today is almost entirely different than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Completely different people. And as much as I'd like to believe that my current circle will still be with me a decade from now, I have the life understanding of knowing that's not guaranteed. It may not. Who knows? And you just have to be at peace with that. And
Mm.
and because we all only have so much bandwidth of time, bandwidth of energy, bandwidth of attention, and we have to be incredibly intentional about who we choose to give that to. So the circle you keep, your board of directors, if you will,
Yeah.
is arguably one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life, and you need to make sure that that is a very worthy investment.
If there was a way to identify when is it time to not give this specific person so much energy, what are some like red flags that you could give us that make us go, okay, that's a red flag?
There's a few that pop into my mind. The first is, and we can all define the word love however we choose, but does this person love me unconditionally, as in they want what's best for me, or do
Yeah.
they have some type of hidden agenda? So first criteria is, does this person selfless enough to, when they offer me advice or they give me recommendations or they hold me accountable, are they doing so because they want to see me continue to grow and to be happy? So
Amen.
that's one. Another is, does this person challenge me and push me? Or do they just is it the prototypical yes man? Do they just agree with everything, or do they hold me to the fire when I'm not behaving as my best self, or when I fall short of an expectation? Do they love me enough and care enough about me to hold me to that high standard? Do they add value to my life where they're pushing me and moving me forward? Are they teaching me? Are they mentoring me? Are they pouring into me while they're still simultaneously holding me accountable? And of course, with all of those, I also want to make sure I'm asking myself the reciprocal. Am I loving them unconditionally?
Yeah.
Do I want what's best for them, or is it all about me? Am I pushing and challenging them and holding them accountable? Am I adding value to their life? And in my opinion, if the answer is not yes, yes, yes in both directions, then it's probably time to reevaluate whether that person should be an integral part of your life. It doesn't mean you have to cut them out completely and ghost them and not ever speak to them. It just means, hey, I've only got so much bandwidth, and I'm not going to invest a lot of it in you if we don't have this reciprocal relationship.
Isn't it funny how we're almost 50 years old and we have to talk about this almost like we're in high school again?
Yeah.
Like and I think as we get older, that's part of our problem, is that we're like, no, why do I have to go through this again? I've already been through this multiple times. I don't want to start over. I don't want to start over. Right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because it's just silly. It's silly, like just how we can grow as humans in the world that I coach, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and abundantly, how we can grow in those pillars. And if we don't have people that are growing with us in our circle, then we become, I don't know, they think we're too good or arrogant, or, like you're better than us, but I think we stop giving them value also. I think you're exactly right, is we stop caring about people that are not putting the work in on themselves to grow themselves the way they need to grow themselves, right? And if they're not my sons, Max and Leo, there's a part of us that's like, okay, well, I got to take care of me and Max and Leo, Angela, and then everybody else.
Absolutely. And you have to be so intentional with that. And one of the things that I think has helped me immensely in kind of this, hopefully progression towards a higher level of self-awareness and evolution is I try not to look at any aspect of the world anymore as right or wrong or
Oh,
good or
wow.
bad.
Wow.
I try and look at everything as whether or not it's a good fit.
Huh.
Is having Matt in my life a good fit? It's not me saying, is Matt good or bad, or is he right or wrong? It's, is Matt a good fit? And I try and look at everything through that lens, because one thing I've learned, especially with the divisiveness going on in our country at present, is what you think is good or right, you could find an equally intelligent and worldly person on the other side who has the exact polar opposite viewpoint you do, and they believe their viewpoint is good and right. So
Correct.
many of these things can coexist. So really, the relationships in my life, it just comes down to, are we still a good fit? Or are we a good fit? And that's what I meant earlier when I said you can start off being a great fit for each other, but if people start growing in a different direction or at different paces, then it might not be a good fit anymore. And that's okay. That
It's just
doesn't mean
wild.
one person is bad. It doesn't mean one person is wrong. It just means this no longer fits, and we should probably make some type of change.
Yeah. Okay. To the fire.
Oh,
Where's this current fire I'm feeling from you right now? Because when I had lunch with you or dinner the other day, it wasn't like this. Like that's the pace I'm feeling from you, Alan. And dude, what's going on, man?
well, it's kind of a healthy cocktail of a few things. First, let's make sure that we're on the understanding that when it's something that I am passionate about, or something that I care about, or something that I have a strong conviction about, I've always been incredibly expressive.
Okay.
But there is a long list of things that I don't want to be over dramatic and say I'm apathetic, but there's a long list of things that I'm very indifferent on that I don't care about. And if we were having a discussion about those things, you would not see any fire because like I said, I'm indifferent and I don't care.
That's
So,
fair.
when I'm on stage or I'm writing or I'm on a podcast like this, we're inevitably talking about things that light me up and fill my bucket. And then you just feel the energy coming out. So some of it is simply the context of what we're talking about. When I think back to early childhood, I have always been incredibly expressive. I've always worn my emotions on my sleeve, and
Ah,
sometimes that's a good thing, and other times, especially in my younger years, not so much. When I
same.
when I had a bad attitude or I was upset about something, I was equally expressive in the other direction.
Yep.
And I've learned hopefully to regulate that a little bit more. But that's a part of it. The other thing that I give credit to, they say historically that public speaking is at the top of most people's fears.
Yep.
And I think when you unpack that, it's usually because unconsciously, some of the first experiences any of us have speaking in front of a group many times is in school when we're younger. You raise your hand, you answer a question, and if you said something that was the wrong answer and the teacher or some of the students kind of belittled you, that
Yep.
could unconsciously plant a seed that makes you afraid to speak in front of others. So while I don't consciously remember those early experiences, I'm under the assumption that the first several times I ever spoke in public for any reason, it went fairly well because I've always been fine with it. I've
Wow.
never been bashful. I was never had a problem with standing up in front of my class and giving a book report. Never had a problem, obviously, being on stages in front of thousands of people. In fact, not only do I not have a problem with it, I love it.
Yeah.
Like nothing gets me more excited than knowing that I'm going to be in front of a group of people that has an interest in what I'm going to share with them. But I
Ah,
give credit to the fact that maybe it was serendipity, but some of those first experiences must have been fairly positive because I've never really been bashful about that. And
I
and that
love
could have the
that.
pendulum could have easily swung in the other direction, because I could have been one of those folks that had a really bad time the first few times I spoke, and maybe I would never want to do that. So I think it's a healthy combination of when it's something I'm passionate about, I exude energy. And I just love being in front of people, whether it's a one-on-one Zoom call like this, or whether it's on stage in front of thousands of people. I love sharing the things that I'm passionate about.
Well, let's dig a little deeper here.
Sure.
These four questions I ask on every podcast. I've been doing it since 2019 because for 20 years in public school, I asked these four questions every year at the beginning of the year because I believe these four questions help humans identify their potential and to your point, their passion and the thing that they're great at, right? So the first question is, what do you love more than anything in the whole world?
Well, I mean, the initial thought that comes to mind, of course, is my children, Luke, Jack, and Lila. And I
Sure.
think as a parent, that's an unconditional love. So I'm going to set that one aside. Uh, I love pouring into people.
Yep.
To me, there are very few things in this world as fulfilling as sharing something you're passionate about and getting that immediate feedback, whether it's a smile, a head nod like you're doing right now, somebody looking down at their notebook to write something down. There's just something incredibly fulfilling about what I call lighting another person's candle.
Yeah.
And that's
That's so
really how I
good.
look at what I do. I'm in the business of lighting people's candles.
I love that, Alan. You should say
And
that all the time.
well, here's the thing too, and I don't know who originally said this, or I'd give them attribution, but a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And this is what I did not understand in my younger years.
Man, that's
I
so
was I
good.
was very zero sum. I was very, if I give you something, that makes me less than. And now it's the exact opposite. I can light as many candles as possible,
Preach.
and mine's not going to shine any dimmer. And if we can take this analogy one step further, blowing out other people's candles ain't going to make mine shine brighter. So at the
No.
same time, I wake up every day trying to light as many people's candles as I can. And that might
Dude,
just be a quick smile and a good morning to a complete stranger in an elevator, or it might be standing on stage in Nashville speaking to 1,000 people. But my goal is to light candles. And that is what I love doing. Outside of my love for my children, that is my number one North Star.
That's my favorite thing to do at Christmas Eve service.
Light
Lighting,
candles.
well, and lighting my son's candle, right?
Yeah.
I think like it's just so beautiful. I don't even know when they started doing that in church, but like that moment, I look forward to every year at
That's
Christmas Eve
awesome.
service. All right, the next question, which you kind of answered, but we'll go there.
Sure.
What makes you tick? What gets you excited?
In order to light other people's candles, then I got to make sure my bucket is full. So one of the things that makes me tick is my own self-care routine. I put a lot of effort and intention and purpose into my physical fitness, my emotional fitness, my
Mm,
mental fitness, my spiritual fitness. I'm very particular. Some
I
would
love
say
it.
finicky about what I
Nope.
eat, about working out, about reading. Like I love personal development. Like I love filling my bucket so that I can pour into others. Once again, I don't know who said this. It was probably one of the titans of the motivational world. Whether it was Les Brown or Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy or Jim Rohn. Some one of those guys probably said it. But you can't pour anything out of an empty cup. So if your cup is empty, you have nothing to offer anyone else. So
Yep.
if my number one goal is to light as many candles as I possibly can, then I need to make sure that my battery is fully charged as often
Yep.
as possible, that
Yep.
my bucket is full so that I have the most to offer others. And the only way I can do that is by being very intentional and protective about my self-care routine. So I value my sleep. I value all of these things because it allows me to show up as my best self. And that does make me tick. Like even at this age, like I get excited to wake up and go to the gym. I get excited to cook some healthy snacks. I mean,
Yes.
I'm a nerd about that stuff, but boy, do I love it.
Oh, I love that answer. That makes me very happy that that was your answer. I'm very much in alignment with what you just said.
Awesome.
Next question. I used to say just purpose, and I've changed it to purposes because I believe that we have multiple purposes. What are Alan Stein Jr.'s purposes?
Well, one is to raise three well-adjusted, emotionally intelligent contributors to this world in the form of
Yep.
my three children.
Yep.
Can I teach my children how to be good human beings that can make a difference? Can I teach them to be free thinkers? I tell my kids all of the time, I'll never tell you guys what to think. My job is to teach you how to think. And if you ever ask me a question about anything, I'll always answer it honestly, but you don't have to adopt the same ideology I have. You're free to disagree and free to carve your own path. So number one is, am I being able to, and I hope that's going to be part of my legacy one day. Am
Mm,
I able to raise three human beings that are going to contribute to this world in whatever way they see fit? So that's certainly one. And then the other, an offshoot of that, we've kind of talked about throughout this conversation. Have I been planting the right seeds with the right people and making a difference in people's lives? Whether it's the guy I bumped into who's a 10-year NBA referee who said I made a difference in his life, or maybe there was someone in Nashville at the event where I met you that I said something on stage that at that moment it just resonated with them and put them on a slightly different path.
mm.
Who knows? But make it, and it sounds so cliche, I can't even say it without almost rolling my own eyes. But can I make my corner of the world just a little bit better by the contributions that I'm making? I mean, that is ultimately my
Mm.
purpose.
All right. And the last question that we are all trying to figure out in our lifetime, why is Alan Stein Jr. on Earth?
I would hope to kind of dovetail off of number three, just to make this world just a slightly better place. And that's the thing. I don't have these grandiose ambitions to change the world. I mean, yeah, there's certain things that I can easily, armchair quarterback and say I wish were different. But I don't really have an interest in changing the entire world. but I certainly want to take care of my backyard. And
Mm.
I say that metaphorically. I certainly want to make sure that I'm lighting as many candles as I can, and that at the top of that list are my three children. I'm pouring into them. And if I can do that in some way, shape, or form, then maybe things are just a little bit better for the handful of people I've had a chance to have an impact on. And
Mm.
to me, I'm okay with that. If there's a handful of people at my funeral, which I hope is not for another 50 years, but that just say, hey, he was a good man and he made a difference in my life, I'd be completely fine with that.
Mm. Well, I think that they're going to probably say more than that, Alan.
I appreciate that.
Um, how can people get a hold of you? Like, how can they get in touch with you?
The main hub is my website, and that's just alansteinjr.com. An offshoot of that is I'm very active and present on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, I guess X, and Facebook. And I'm just at Alan Stein Jr. on those. You mentioned the two books earlier, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game. You can pick those up on Amazon or Audible or wherever you get your books and audiobooks. I take a lot of pride in not only being accessible, but also being very responsive. So
Yep.
if somebody shoots me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn, I promise you I'll get back to you. And of course, if anyone's listening and you're ever looking for a keynote speaker and you feel like some of the things we've talked about would resonate with your group or team, just go to the website and fill out the contact form.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to leave us with today, Alan?
No, this was a lot of fun, man. I've been looking forward to this since we put it on the schedule, and I love the direction that we went. And I
Yeah,
appreciate
me
you
too.
being such an open, active listener and asking very insightful questions. And I
Oh,
enjoyed touching on some things that I normally don't talk about a lot, which is fun.
well, you're a human being, and I like to bring that part out and let that soul come out and say hello. You
Love
did a
it.
great job, man. And I'm very thankful for you, and I'm proud of you and the work that you're doing, and that you're shining your light, and that you're also very human about it. That you let us in and let us know it's not easy. It's a struggle sometimes,
Yes.
and I really appreciate that about you as a friend, because this kind of glamorous world that people see on Instagram and Facebook. They see us on stage or see us making videos or even on podcasts, and they're like, "Oh, they got it all together." And then, in our friend talks, we're like, "No, this is actually what's happening, like in real life." And so I love the humanity about you, Alan, and you have such a humble heart and a generous heart, but also you've acknowledged all the mistakes that you've made in your life. And you're not afraid to talk about it, but you're also learning from them still to this day. And I even talking to you in, a few weeks ago, I can tell that you've actually implemented things that we talked about at that lunch. And I, raise your game, sustain your game. You're a student of your game, and you really are. And it's not, it's, lots of people get on podcasts or they talk or they do a speech, and you're like, okay, good job doing that thing, way to go, right? But you are a student of your life. You literally are. And the interactions that you have, um, I can say as a person that has met you twice now in real life that um, you don't take it for granted. Like, you really don't. And that's very rare in our world, that you have such a great platform, that you take time to acknowledge everyone around you and make us feel like we're the only people in the room.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that and receive that with just, it makes my heart full. I appreciate that very much. And yeah, that feeling is very mutual. That's why we have to be able to make space for new people in our lives
Yeah.
for these types of experiences. So, yeah, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You're welcome, because it's true. And I hope that you get to speak on a lot of stages, because there's a lot of people that need to hear your message, and that need to elevate themselves. and there's more to grow. Like we have so much more to grow. And
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the things that also adds to my fire and adds to my optimism is, I mean, I know consciously that time is not promised, that tomorrow is not guaranteed. I know that. But at the same time, I have the belief that the next 50 years of my life are going to be the best 50 years of my life. And that gives me
yes,
so much optimism because my first 50 have been pretty good. Like I'm
yes,
incredibly grateful, but I can't wait to take all of these lessons and all of these missteps and all of these flaws that I've had at my younger ages and grow and evolve from those and apply them to the second half of life. And the cool part is I already know going into it, I'll make a whole host of new mistakes during this next 50, but I'm okay with that because now I've got more tools in my toolbox to be able to course correct and adjust. So yeah, I'm knowing that time is not guaranteed, but behaving and living as if it will be to me just gives me so much optimism.
Hmm. Well, it was a lot of fun having you on the podcast today on a Monday
This was fun.
to start my week. And I really appreciate you. If you need anything, just let me know. But please go out and share this podcast with a friend, with a colleague, with your family. As it's not too late to go after the passion and the thing that you're great at, and to light as many candles in your lifetime as you possibly can. But you have to light your candle first.
Amen. Mic drop. That's a great way to end this, my friend.
All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening.